Alright guys, a bit of a different one today. I'm just heading up to Benue, or near Benue there, just for the day, and I've got a bit of weed mapping to do with the drone. Something I've been playing with for a couple of years now, and with a few technological advancements and whatnot, we're finally starting to see it come together. Hopefully we're to the point where it's practical and implementable to farmers and contractors. So yeah, I'll take you for a ride to show you how we do it and what it's all about. Some of you might find it interesting, some of you probably won't, but yeah. All right. So, we'll show you a bit more about what we're doing. So, for this particular job today, it's actually for a satellite data company who sell satellite imagery to farmers for, crop health and weed mapping and all the rest. So, the weed mapping I'm doing today is just to collect verification data for that satellite data. It's just to prove that what the satellite's picking up is correct. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to run this data through my program just to see, what we come out at, what we can pick up. So as a part of that is to, you can see a white crossover there, you might not be able to, you've seen me do it 1,000 times before, but I'll put ground control out in the corners of the areas that we're flying. For weed mapping, you'd normally only need to do that once, just one point, just as a checkpoint. This company's asked for it as if it's a survey, like grade pickup. For whatever reason, that's fine. Sort of client wants what I'll do. But yeah, I'll put all the control out, flight control. There's a base jet set up over there. What I am going to do also, with clients asked for, and something that I probably would do doing weed mapping in general, is come out and ping a couple of these weeds as verification checks. So these are just melons. So I'll shoot some of these melons. Yep. And so when I look at the data, I can drop this point on and just confirm that what I picked up there is correct. There's a smaller one. It's probably another good one. Ideally, if I can find an even smaller one as another check, that would be ideal. Actually, there's a bit of radish over here. I'll go grab that. Show you that point. So there's the photo control point there. Just something to help. I'll grab some radish. So call that radish. Then if their satellite data only picks up the melons, then they know, okay, it's only good for melons. But if they do pick up the radish, and like this smaller one, these two smaller ones are a good idea. Probably this one here, it'd be a good tester. All right, so that's stored. So that's only, 10 by 10, really. So it'd be interesting to see how that all comes out. But yeah, so that's the ground truthing. I'm going to fly these areas now with the drone. I am flying it with the multispectral drone, the Mavic 3M. I don't need any of the multispectral data. There's a bit of flea bane, I'll grab that. I don't need any of the multispectral data for my weed mapping. Mine's all RGB. So I can actually use a bigger and better camera and drone than the Mavic, which will cover a lot more ground a lot quicker. But because I'm already doing this for a client, I'll just process this data. And then I'll show you how the AI works, running over this paddock and picking up all the weeds. And yeah, how quick it is, how easy it is. It can almost all be done paddock side, which is pretty incredible. But yeah, we'll keep going. All right, I'm just flying the paddocks. yeah, the client requested some 300 by 300 blocks where there's weeds. There's actually bugger all weeds in this paddock. This is a lupin crop from last year that's been sprayed out, so it hasn't been cropped this year. We're in the middle of harvest now, so it's just a good tester because there's a lot of you know, a lot of dead fallow on the crop on the paddock. So we're trying to pull the weeds out from amongst all that. So I've done 300 by 300, like 2 next to each other. I've done another one here, and then I noticed a heap of weeds down here. Client only asked for 3 areas, but I've just extended this 150 by 300 just because I noticed a fair few weeds down here. And this paddock doesn't actually have a lot of weeds, so that'll provide good data for them, but it'll also provide good data for me to show, yeah, the program at work picking up the weeds. I've got more batteries charging here, and yeah, getting all ready. This will be me for the rest of the day. I might show a little bit more, but more importantly, I'll show you the data side of things. Oh, out of interest, some people might want to know like parameters. So again, this is what the clients requested. They've asked for 85% forward overlap, 75% side overlap at a height of 65 meters, which picks up at 3 centimeter GSD, or 3 centimeters per pixel. Yeah, so 65 meters above the ground. So that gets us about 25 hectares of flight, which isn't very efficient, I don't think. And then using the P1 camera on the Matrix 300 or 350 we've got, I'd expect we'll be pushing up towards that 60 hectares per flight per half hour. So suddenly practical to get you 500 hectares a day, which is, I think, what you'd probably want if you were doing broadacre. Would be, you know, 500 hectares a day. You can keep ahead of the sprayer, on at least in most operations. And yeah, get all the data, get the weeds mapped, and then get that data into the sprayer. So you could have your young bloke on the farm, or the farmer who's a bit more tech savvy. He can be out there, you know, flying the paddock 2 days ahead of the guy on the sprayer, and just keeping that buffer. So you're flying one paddock and he's in the paddock behind spraying, or 2 paddocks behind spraying. That would be the idea. But yeah, I'll show you more of the processing side of things. All right, finished on the paddocks out there. That was all lupin fallow. Now we've got some wheat or barley or something fallow here. This is an extra that they want done. It's actually got a shitload more weeds than the other stuff had, so should be good. I've set my base up in the corner over there, put a new point in on the corner of the paddock, and then just going to do control points in the corners, one in the guts, and then shoot a couple of these weeds as well. This one should be good. I reckon this one will be better than the lupin, because the lupin's thicker. It's probably like more vegetation, whereas this is thinner, grassier stuff. So I'd say we'll probably pick this up a bit better, but there's also a lot more here, so we might end up spraying 30% of the paddock, 40% of the paddock regardless. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I'll quickly show you what I'm doing. Again, for the general weed mapping stuff, you'd only need to do 1 checkpoint, I'd say. PPK or the RCK is more than enough. For ag doesn't need to be that accurate. 200 mil fine for ag, as opposed to survey where we're chasing 10-20 mil. So yeah, just a white cross. You can see where I've got my shoe. We want to be photo control point, center, survey, stop, and then whilst I'm here, I will grab some quick shots of some of the weeds. So I'll grab a melon, because there's melons everywhere here. Melon. I'll get a photo of that with my foot next to it for size. Is there any radish here? Obviously want to try and get different vegetation if I can. Oh, what's that? Double G? Double G, that'll be a good one. Double G. But yeah, these guys they won't even know what a double G is. They're not from our local area. Radish. Oh, there's radish right there, perfect. Yeah. If there's anything else that I recognise or know the name of the weed, I'll ping that as well. But actually, what's this? It's a different weed again. That's just we call them dandelions, but we call them cape weed. Daisies, cape weed, whatever you want to call it. All right. So yeah, that's all I'm doing is I'm just pinging a few check shots on some weeds, ground control points, and then I'll apply this as well. Like I said, most of it's all on the computer, but at least you have an idea of what I do in the field. We'll go from there. What's that? Double G again. All right.
We're all there, have fun.
Let's go.
And we found the track that runs from.
All right, all done in the paddocks. Just got to pull my base down. It's just a bit improvised, just on a fence post there. But yeah, pull that down and we are done and back to the office to process some of the data. G'day guys, we're back in the office now. I'm just going to walk through the steps in processing this weed mapping data. So I've taken the photos, images off the SD card from the drone. I've put them on the PC, and now we're going to fire up the program that does the magic, which is Pix4d Fields. So Pix4d is a program that we use for surveying. So we've got Pix4d Mapper here, and I've got Mavic somewhere on here as well, Mavic there, for our survey flight, UAV flight data. But Pix4d Fields is their ag branch, which, you know, applies similar methodology, but is obviously chasing different outputs. Yes. I'll update that later. Just wants to update the program. So we will create a new project. So it fires up like this. I've already run these flights before to get the client the data that they needed. But now that I've done that, I'll walk through it again with you guys. I'm just going to do a smaller sample. So instead of the whole area, I'll just do a nice 100 hectares. That'll give you a good idea. I feel like 100 hectares is a good sample. It'll give you an idea of the processing time and what's involved. All right, so we are at Chilmany, which is a farm near Benue, Western Australia, north of Geraldton. Fun fact, my old man actually used to harvest here a long time ago. Yeah, so what we were actually doing there, which I may or may not have mentioned in the field, is we were doing some UAV flights to verify some satellite imagery. And yeah, we had to come out and fly this paddock, or portions of them. And because I've already captured the data, I figured I would run it through the program here to just demonstrate. And it's actually a good paddock, a good area that's got a good array of weeds, but not a full paddock either. That gives you a good idea of what the capabilities of this program are. So I'm just going to run this data that I've already captured for this satellite company, and I'm going to show you what we can do with the Pix4d Fields using we used a Mavic 3 in this case. But to start with, we will import. So you can obviously import satellite data itself. You can pre-stitch your GeoTIFF, which is all the images put together into one large image. You can do that in another secondary program, but we're going to do it all within Pix4d Fields itself. So I'm just going to go folder,
It's already navigating to it because that's where it was looking last time. These are the ones that I want to use that will give me roughly 100 hectares of flight area. So we'll open that up. There you go, it's going to take about 20 seconds to import them. Alright, photos have all imported and now it gives us our processing options. So we will use fast processing because all we want is a stitched image. We're just going to try and identify weeds within the imagery. We're not looking for, you know, height models, contours or anything like that. That's probably more survey grade. I imagine the reason you'd need that for ag is for your contour lines and I don't know, other stuff. I haven't gone that deep into it, to be perfectly honest. I've only really focused on the weed mapping, but yeah, for the weed mapping, fast is all we need. Yep, full res. We want as good an image as possible, and don't need to worry with advanced settings. So it's pretty simple. Just leave it how it's preset, fast and full. Apply that. There's all our images. As you can see, there's an event for every single image. These images are all PPK corrected. So I set up a survey grade base down here. I've flown on the paddock and I've PPK corrected all the imagery. The only reason I did that is because I also had the GPS rover out, survey rover out, and I shot individual weeds in the paddocks because that's what the client requested. So we got 20mm accuracy shots on individual weeds so that they could analyse the satellite imagery to see up to what size of weed they could identify from their satellite imagery. But in most circumstances, if you were to do this yourself or I was to come do this for a farmer, I would just use the DJI base, which would give RTK corrections to the drone. So we wouldn't need no further steps in post-processing the imagery as opposed to what I've had to do here. But again, that's going to be irrelevant to most farmers, so I wouldn't worry about that. Start processing. Cool. So this is one of the two sort of long-winded parts that take a little bit of time. So that's why I've chosen a nice neat 100 hectare. It'll give you a good idea of, what to do, like what it's going to take to do. So processing time and everything all is dependent on your flight height, your overlap of the imagery, what kind of quality of camera you have, so quality of the image, size of the image file. So for this, again, went on the specs requested by the client, which seems to be pretty similar to what a few people I know are doing in ag with their weed mapping, which is about 75 side overlap and 85% forward overlap. That gives you a really nice, clean ortho photo. I have done ag in the past where a lot of people have said sort of 50% side overlap is more than enough, but I haven't seen enough of that myself. So I'm just sticking to the safe number to ensure results. If I get more time, I'd like to do some experiments, but obviously that's time in the field that you can't guarantee and you're not getting paid for. So for now, I'm working on the industry standard, which is 75 by 85. We flew at about 65 metres, which gives us a 3cm GSD with the Mavic 3 M, which is the multispectral. Step up again from Mavic 3M or the Mavic RTK is to something like a Matrix 350 or a 400. All DJI. These are all DJI drones with a P1 camera, and I think the P2 is about to come out. But the P1 will capture over twice as good an image as the Mavic 3 RTK. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. And the better the camera, the higher you can fly, the more you can capture per flight, the quicker you can fly. But the better the camera, the bigger the image files, and the longer it'll take to process. So yeah, that's just something you got to think about. It's saying it's got another 29 minutes, so I'll just skip ahead and turn you back on when we are done. What's the time? 12 o'clock at the moment. I will let you know exactly when it's finished. Okay, so stitched imagery is complete now. So you can see where the stitched image overlays the satellite image, just the Google Earth image or whatever it is. First things we want to do now is set our boundary, or create our boundary. So we are going to go to boundaries. We can go AI boundary, which is exactly what it sounds like. The AI looks at the image and tries to figure out, the boundary would be for like you look at paddock lines, probably like the fire break around the outside. But generally when I've used it, it hasn't really worked. It's probably better off for orchards and things like that. So I'm just going to create mine myself. Zooming in here on our paddock. I want to go to the edge of the fire break because I want to grab any weeds that are on the fire break. This can take a little bit of time, depending on how big an area and how convoluted the bends and the corners and everything are. It can be as rough as you want, I guess. Once you've done this for a paddock, for a full paddock, then you can just import the same boundary file every single time. You don't need to string it every single time. So I guess if you were a farmer who was going to do this yourself yearly, the first year would be more time consuming than the following years because you'd have to set up all this kind of stuff, all your boundaries and whatnot. But once you've done that, it'll be done. I guess what you could also do is, I'm assuming you've already got your boundaries in your sprayers and whatnot of your farm, sprayers and headers and seeders and everything. You could probably import that, and that would be a good way to check the accuracy of the like your farm's GPS system. So I had to break it to most farmers, but I know you think your GPS system that you have set up on your farm is accurate. Well, it is accurate within itself, relative to itself. But in the vast majority of cases, it is not survey grade accurate to real world coordinates. So pretty much every time I go to a farm to do things like this, and we work with the farmer's GPS system, or I capture data, we put it in the sprayer, and the farmer goes to spray, they will inevitably find out that things aren't exact. So the GPS data and the GPS signal coming from your RTK base on your farm is usually done by hear point when it's first set up by, what are they, McIntosh and Sons around Geraldton and that, and Case IH or Percher International, I think they are. Whoever sets them up often just do a hear. They don't survey them in, like survey level accuracy them in. So they're perfectly fine within your own farm because you're just going to use the same GPS data and corrections every single time. But that base point is usually about a metre and a half, 2 metres out from the real world. So when it comes to something like spot spraying, that can be an issue. So it's probably not the worst idea to pull your digital data in and overlay it over. So if you already had a boundary for this paddock, pulling it in and overlaying it over our imagery, corrected real world imagery, survey grade imagery, you would see how far out it is, and then from that we could get our correction, which might be a metre south by a metre and a half east or something, that when we output our shapefile for the spraying, we know that we need to adjust that by a metre and a half. Some farms are pretty good within half a metre, which if you're putting a couple of metre buffer around each spraying location, you'll generally hit. But just something to keep in mind, particularly if you're going to start using things like the DJI base with a DJI Agri spraying drone and whatnot, you will find that in most cases your DJI base will not be giving you exactly the same readings as your base point put in on your farm, your GPS RTK on your farm for the rest of your machinery. So it's a correction that needs to be made. Ideal world, you would correct your site base to real world coordinates and shift all your paddock data or all your your farm data. It should just be a straight block shift. but I know that's probably in some cases impractical. So if you're going to do something like this, you've just got to know what your shift is between your farm and the real world. And if you do any sort of real world capture, like with the DJI base, you'll just have to apply that shift every single time you output data for your spraying. Just something to keep, yeah, it's something we come across quite often. Very likely the newest, like if a base has been set up in the last couple of years, I imagine, I'm not 100% sure, but I imagine that these ag companies that set up these bases these days are probably now able to set them up more accurately than they would have in the past, but it's just something to keep in mind. Alright, as you can see, I'm just getting a bit tricky around these. I'm probably being a bit pedantic. Just getting as much of this paddock as I can. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the stitching of that photo actually took about 1 hour and 20. Which it initially said it would take half an hour, but I believe that's mainly because I was trying to do other work on the laptop at the same time that required a fair bit of the CPU, the GPU, and the RAM. So that was probably not a good demonstration. In my experience, what the program says down the bottom, its estimated time is within 20%. Like it's, I think it said 30 minutes. I would expect it to come within that, 30, 35 minute sort of range anyway. So just something to keep in mind. So that was about, 45 minutes, say worst case scenario for 100 hectares. Alright, there we go, finally down the bottom. I'm still probably doing a bit too much on this computer at the moment, so it's a little bit slow in reacting. Alright, now I'm going to come out here. I'll just go like this, very simple. Yep. Now we just want to tick that. That's our boundary done for that paddock. Let's call it boundary 1. Of course, the paddock would have a name in the real world. Farmer would have a name for it. I'm sure I actually read it on the job sheet, but I cannot remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to call it boundary 1. Yep, 97 hectares, pretty close, so let's call it 100 hectare, close enough. Alright. Now we want to create an obstacle, because we obviously don't want to be spraying this dam, or swamp, or whatever it's supposed to be. So an obstacle is something that you do not want the drone to fly. Sorry. If you were spraying this paddock with a DJI drone, like an Agris, TB50 or whatever, you obviously would not want it flying and spraying in here, and you also would not want it flying into the trees. So that's where the purpose of an obstacle is, like it's somewhere that the drone, the spraying drone, absolutely will not go. So it would fly, and then it would fly around, and then fly again, to avoid any chance of flying into a tree. And they do have their own avoidance systems and whatnot. For this, tractor spraying, I don't know if it's as critical, but for the sake of making sure we don't accidentally spray anything into this water, which I assume is something that should be of concern to most farmers, I will just create an obstacle around it just in case. And it should mildly speed up our processing because it's just one less area that the processing needs to look at. So we do not want to hurt this water, particularly around the Banu hut area. If you've got some marron in there, you don't want to be pumping it full of chemicals that could make them taste not so good or kill them. That's not to say that there's marron in this dam. I don't think there is. So don't go out there and try and find them. Alright. Cool. Yep. Obstacle 1. And that's the only obstacle I'm going to do, but you get the picture. Alright, cool. Again, obstacles probably more relatable to the drone spraying, the agri stuff, but still good to show you. Okay, now we want to do magic tool, which is the, okay, we're in boundaries, yep. we're finished with that. Yeah, now we want to utilise our magic tool. Index is if you want to create an index calculator, which is just an indice map. You can do TGI or variable for this one because it's RGB data, so there's only a limited amount of indices you can create from red, green and blue data. But if I was to run that multispectral data that I had before, you would have a plethora, and you can do your NDVI and GNDVI and all the rest, which is a good check for finding the weeds, but not necessary for us for what we're doing. It's just extra stuff in the program that if you want to go down that path, you want to look at what would you use that for? Probably like a crop that's reasonably 50% grown or 30% grown, and you want to quickly look at it and see how it's grown and where it's healthy and where it's not healthy, and then you can adjust your spreading rate of your urea and other fertilizers on obviously throwing the extra fertilizer on the good spots and dialing it down for the spots that are shit that aren't growing. That's what you'd use that for. Again, I'm not right into it, but I'm sure as time goes on, everyone's going to find more and more applications for it. For now, we want to use the magic tool. Okay, yep, orthomosaic. I do want to include my obstacle so it doesn't look in there and doesn't bother searching through there. Okay. Alright, this is our grid size. This is the next time consuming bit. So as you can see, you zoom in, it's got these little grids. At the moment, they're set to 2 meters. So this is what it's going to split the whole paddock up into. And then when we start using the AI to look for the weeds, it's going to look in each of these individual little squares to find weeds. So generally, let's find a tiny weed, like a really small bugger somewhere. I guess like one of these. So something like this, he's probably 200 mil wide. He's only taken up a tiny percentage of this 2 meter by 2 meter square. You probably want something to stand out a bit more than that so that the AI detects it. So for this case, I'm going to go for a 1 meter grid cell size. And now that weed suddenly, is standing out a lot more within the cell. Again, there we go. Trial and error. Play with it a bit, and you'll find a happy medium, because the smaller grid size you go, the longer it's going to take to process this next step. So you just got to keep that in mind when you do things like this. It's all about efficiency versus how pedantic you want to be and how precise you want to be in getting every single little weed, as opposed to maybe missing some. But yeah, meter by meter, so that's probably 200 mil weed there. I think from when I flew it and I've processed this all before, I was sort of able to quite comfortably identify sort of weeds to about 100 mil. That weed there is probably a 100 mil weed, even smaller. But then after that, you're going to really struggle to get. So when I say 100 mil, I mean 100 mil from side to side of the weed, the footprint of the weed. If it's something spindly like a bit of radish and it doesn't have a lot of leaves on it, it might be even harder to pick up. But yeah, you can see them there. So this is what we're doing. I'm going to leave it at a meter. Rotation is if you wanted to rotate these lines to match the crop lines a bit better. So let's find a nice clear crop line. So you can see it sort of going up through that tram line there. So I might go just a smidgen. Okay, that's better. It runs along that tram line a bit better, a bit neater. Again, not critical, just probably more relevant for stuff like orchards and whatnot, where you have nice neat rows of trees and so on. But yeah, just trying to explain it to you, show you what it is. Offsets is just, again, adjusting the grids left and right or up and down. Again, probably more for orchards and whatnot, not critical for this broadacre cereal stuff. So let's go continue. This is going to be the next very time consuming bit. It's going to take an hour, hour 20, hour 10. It's jumping around a bit, but yeah, this is probably the most time consuming bit. So I'd say it's going to take between an hour and 2 hours. Again, 100 hectare. I've done a 1 meter cell size. If I'd done that 2 meters, it'd probably be I'm not going to say half, but it would be certainly less, a lot less, like 20-30% quicker. So things you got to keep in mind. So I'm just going to let this run, and we're going to come back, yeah, when it's done. See you in a bit. Alright, so the gridding has finished. We're at stage 3 now. So we just need to name what we're finding, which is just weeds. Plain and simple. Next. And now we want to identify our weeds. So we've got wanted and not wanted. So wanted is cells with weeds in them, and not wanted are cells without weeds in it. So the AI can begin to learn from the photography, or imagery, sorry, what it wants to find. So obviously we've got a few different types of weeds here. You know, it's probably like grass. That'll be melons or some other sort of broadleaf. So you want to get a fairly good contrast in weeds, as in all the different types, different weeds on different soil colours. So like, let's head down to some of this lighter coloured soil and see if we can find a weed. Where are we? You press space bar, you can hide the grid lines. Anyway, I'll probably narrow in on some down there. Once we have let the AI do its thing. There's another one. So I'm trying to get different coloured soils, weeds on different coloured soils, and just a good spread of them all over the place. Obviously it's easier if you can remember exactly where your weeds were when you were driving around, which I cannot at the moment. I know there's a ton up here, so I'll go back up here. There's a heap of ryegrass in this corner here, amongst other things. Obviously these are melons. Want to get some small ones as well. You really want to find those tiny ones sitting on their own, so that the AI looks for them. But as I'll show you in a second, once we start going some not wanted ones, it'll help refine. And then once we find patches of weeds in this paddock, it'll narrow down, because generally the weeds are all sort of in a similar area. No, there's heaps here. This whole area will probably end up getting a blanket over it. There you go. Alright, it's about 50, nearly 60 so far. Now let's find a few not wanteds. So let's look for some clear stuff here. That's clear, that's clear. Let's get out to the paddock and find some clear. That's clear, that's clear, that's clear. Needs 3, and now it's going to do its AI. Obviously, because I've got a lot more wanted than not wanted, it still hasn't woken up to what I'm trying to do yet. So as I select more not wanted, it'll slowly thin out the algorithm. So now I want to zoom in on some of these ones that it's highlighted as weeds, which obviously aren't weeds, and fill them in. So the AI is learning, oh, okay, they're not actually weeds, they're just... So what would have been is that we would have had cells that I've selected as weeds that would have had a little weed in the corner, and then it would have had all this lupin fallow. So it's just seeing this lupin fallow and going, oh yeah, so stuff like this is what you want. But now that I'm training it to not select that just lupin fallow, it's going, oh, actually he only wants that lupin fallow that has the little green weed in it, you know, little green round weed in it. So it's just about training the AI. See, this has all been pushed over. So don't want any of that. That's all dead old weeds. So that's what I mean about getting different varieties of texture of soil and vegetation. What about down here? No, just a couple on that. Oh, we definitely want to get to the edge here. It's probably going to randomly identify those edges. That doesn't look like a weed. That looks like just a bit of the path. So I'll select that. What else we got? Let's keep checking these edge ones. There's no active weeds there, I don't believe. Just dead stuff. Again, because I've got other stuff processing on the computer at this minute, it can be a little bit slow. Alright, yep, there's no weeds there, no weeds there. Just continue to train the AI. Another thing about the processing I've been doing, like I said, I have got other stuff running in the background that's sucking up power. But my PC also is has lost half its RAM. So it's got it's 128 gigabyte of RAM, which is quite powerful, but I've actually lost half my RAM because it's dropped, like it's overheating one of them. So I've disabled 64 gigs of my RAM, so I'm running at basically half efficiency. So normally I'd process about twice as quick as I am now. Like with those image stitching and the gridding, that would have happened twice as fast if I had full access to my computer's full capabilities. So that's something to keep in mind when if you want to look into this yourself as a farmer, is that the computer and if you add up the computer and the program, they're ultimately going to cost almost as much as the drone equipment is. So we're talking like, this is an 11 grand laptop. You could go for a desktop if you weren't hell-bent on having to do anything in the side of the paddock, if you're just happy to go back to the farm office and do it there. But yeah, we're talking sort of $10,000+ computers, so you've got the processing power, and that's a pretty important factor in this whole thing, which often gets overlooked. And as technology gets better, unfortunately, data gets bigger, which is going to continue. So there's another word there, which means that, you've got to be careful that your technology is not better than your processing ability, which is something we're always chasing our tail with in survey, is that we are getting better and better technology, but that technology is getting harder and harder to handle because of the size of the data. So it's not like some of my survey jobs would be 1.5 terabytes once they're complete. So that's just an idea. Let's go some more not wanted. Okay. Don't really think there's anything there. So eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to start getting some false positives, which is kind of unavoidable. You're definitely going to find that happy medium between false positives and capturing all the weeds. So in collecting every single weed, you're probably going to get, a very small percentage that end up being not weeds, that it's identified as weeds. But you'd rather unnecessarily spray a tiny percent of your paddock than miss weeds that you could have got. So it's all about finding that happy medium. But it's minimal. It's pretty minimal. That's clearly a weed there. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at all these isolated weeds out on their own that the AI has detected. Because often if you see a weed where there's one weed, there'll be more. So I'm just looking to see, first of all, if it is a weed, which I don't believe like that one is. And then secondly, if where it has identified a weed, whether there's any more nearby that it's missed. And I sort of do this to about 60 of each or something around there, depending on the size of the flight area, until I'm pretty happy that it's nailing all the weeds. And I can, like I said, I can live with a few false positives. It's not the end of the world. But I want all the weeds. So that one, that looks like a weed. I'm happy with that. And was there any nearby? Yep, another one up above it. So I want that one. That one there. So you might spend half an hour doing this. Again, depending on the size of the, there's more there, depending on the size of the flight area. It's obviously going to be more efficient to do a 500 hectare area in one go than 5 100 hectare areas individually. Okay. Does that look like a weed? That does not. Pardon me. Another beautiful virus received from my lovely children from daycare, which I'm battling at the moment. Okay, that's definitely wanted. Remembering that we're going to have a 3 metre buffer over these as well. So if something's neighboured, been missed, but it's neighboured, it's probably going to get hit by the other one. Alright. See what else we can find. Like I said, keep zooming over the weeds and looking for weeds nearby that have been missed. There's a weed there. There's a weed there. Any more? Like in some parts, it's probably unnecessary to try and show you all this, but I also want to give you a realistic idea of how long it does take to do this part. So like I said, probably about half an hour. I will skip some of it for you, but whoops. Yeah, like I was saying, having a computer with the right processing power is pretty critical, and probably your biggest hurdle, to be honest. Learning to fly the drones and whatnot isn't that big a deal, but yeah, knowing how to operate this program and whatnot is probably the bigger scenario. Alright, I'm just going to speed all this up. Alright, it's been about 15 minutes. I've fine-tuned it a bit. Over the whole 100 hectares, you can see all these small blue dots. This is all the weeds. There's definitely a few false positives in there, but you'll take a couple of false positives provided you are nailing all the weeds. So just go like, zoom right in here. You see all those weeds there. So next we'll just continue on. So clean up. Here we can brush, which as you can see on the screen here, I can go like this and fill in areas that are quite densely weeded, just to fill in gaps and stuff. You can make this bigger. Yeah, well that's weeds. That's all weeds. That sort of thing. Then there's also the buffer. So if we look at these weeds now, if we just go one buffer, so it'll zoom in, find a single thing. Alright, it's one there. If we go buffer, it adds every box that's bordering that box becomes a weed box. And you see here, what one more do? That nearly closes it in. I'd be tempted to even go with that, just because it'll close in a lot of gaps and it won't stress out the sprayer so much when the sprayer is trying to turn on and off. If I go back one, no, yeah, so that's effectively 3 meters. That's effectively 3 meter buffer around each weed. Probably more than enough 5. It just depends on the paddock. You just have to make a judgment on the paddock and a judgment on how old your sprayer is, and if the smaller boxes are tripping out your sprayer and your sprayer is struggling to keep up with turning the nozzles on and off, then you might be better off going for a bigger buffer, so they're larger polygons and it's not so erratic. You can finish this part. You go output settings, and we will go area annotation. Let's call it weeds again. Yes. That should only take 10 seconds. Maybe 30. Alright, here we go. Cool. Okay, so now we have our boundaries for the weeds, as you can see there. Again, there's some false positives in there, but you'd rather waste a bit of chemical on a bare paddock. I mean, that's what you're doing anyway when you're blanket spraying, isn't it? So you'd rather waste a little bit of chemical and nail every weed. Next, we shall go export annotations. So export the weed annotations, that's the blue polygons, as a shapefile. Export. Just put it in your job somewhere. I'm just going to put it in here for now. Just call it weeds. Polygons. Save that. Cool. It's just going to open it. So then we could open it in like a GIS program, or probably whatever your farm mapping program is you have for your sprayers on your desktop. But anyway, I don't need that for the minute. Okay, that's all done. Now we want to go operation. We want to use existing annotations to pre-fill the grid. Continue. We want to include our boundary and we want to include our obstacle. We're obviously using the ortho mosaic. So what we're doing before was the annotations. Now we're doing the actual operation. So yep, we want using weed annotation. Select. Alright. Prescription unit. Obviously litres per hectare for spraying liquids. Kilograms per hectare for spreading lime sand and fertilizer, and then seeds per hectare for reseeding or seeding. So we want litres. Yep. You can change the name again. I'm just going to leave it as default for the minute. Cool. Alright, now it will do its own. So this is the final sort of buffer, the final blocks, what we're going to do. So you can see in the purple, where I've set it to 1/2 metre. So this is pretty much taking it from a 3 metre buffer zone to a, shit, what would you say that is? Probably another extra 1/2 metre on average around every single one, thereabouts. Yeah, you can go smaller if you want, but I think that works well. So I'm going to leave it at 1/2 metre. That's what I've worked out in the past is nice. Most of this is all going to get blank sprayed where there's lots of weeds, and then there'll just be a few gaps. Like, realistically. Or the next step, actually, we can fill these gaps in to save the machine a bit of stress. Anyway, don't need to do much here. Let's go continue. Alright, cool. Now we have our operation layer. So the purple is obviously what we're going to spray. We need 36. No, 36. It'll be 100. It'll be just round up, I think, if I remember correctly. Or whatever chemical it is, I know it was 100 litres to the hectare. So of the nearly 100 hectares, 96 hectares, we're going to spray 9. So about 10% of the paddock's going to end up getting sprayed, thereabouts. So that's 90% savings on your chemical, which will excite some people, but that's obviously because that's what this paddock is. Some paddocks are going to be a lot worse than that. You might be spraying 50% of the paddock anyway. In fact, I'll do another one after this. The one that I showed, the second paddock I showed in my video in the field, that one was quite weedy, so I'll do that one next, and I expect that one to be over 50% of it needs to be sprayed because it was just full of weeds. But anyway, what you can do from here is, as I was saying, you can fill these holes. So this paint fill, doink, 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 doink. Just fill in any of the, whoops, undo that. You know, the big holes where it might as well just blanket. Just again save the sprayer a little bit of stress in the, you know, the computer and the sprayer having to, you know, turn on and off and freak out. I imagine it would just be better if it has less thinking to do. Again, newer sprayers probably handle it a lot better. Older sprayers going to struggle. So you'll just have to work out what's best for yourself in your machine. If you're working with a contractor like myself, you will have to work that out from the start and then tailor your outputs accordingly. But if you're doing it yourself, yeah, you'll quickly figure out what your sprayer can handle and what it can't. We can add another buffer if we wanted to. We weren't quite happy and we wanted the buffers to go, these polygons to be wider again, but I'm pretty happy we've set that as we want. So yeah, it's going to spray at 90 litres per hectare on all these purple areas, and everything that's not, it's just going to fill with a rate of 0. Alright, we want to go, yeah, I'm happy with that, yeah, like I said, so we're spraying 10% of the paddock. Export, operations, okay, this is where we dictate what we want the data output for. So if we wanted a DJI Agris, we'd select this, all these other things I'm not familiar with, and then just generic tractor and sprayer. I think just about every brand of sprayer takes a shapefile as far as I'm aware, or if not, you can obviously transform that shapefile within your own farming program, I'd say. So yeah, shapefile, continue, there we go. Cells with no rate, which were those, the non-purple ones. We just want to create a 0 rate geometry, so we don't want to spray anything in there. Continue, so all those are going to be 0, no rate. All the purple's going to have a rate. Alright, happy with that. Cell size is 0.5, yada yada yada, export. Okay, again, choose your location, just call it here, just call it Chilmany. Oh, sorry, no, it just wants to know where the folder is. This will do. Cool, alright, that's out, exporting the final operation, shapefiles. So, unnamed project, because I haven't actually named the project, should have called it Chilmany. And then we've got our boundary shapefile, which is the external works of the paddock. And then we've got an RX, and RX is our actual operation shapefile. So that'll be all the individual boundaries where we're spraying. That then is, yeah, pulled into the machine. You pull that shapefile, and you can pull the other boundary shapefile as well into your machine. And yeah, get out there and start driving. And if things are all working as they should be, the sprayer should be just turning on the nozzles as it goes over each weed. So yeah, that's how she works. Yeah, obviously that very first time you do this, there might be a little bit of troubleshooting. Might need to output it in a slightly different way, or as I said, your particular sprayer might not take a straight up shapefile. You might need to convert it to something unusual. I'm not sure, but the Case and the John Deere sprayers that I've played with so far, it's just taken in a shapefile. I will quickly just show you the other paddock. I'll just go straight to the final result, so you can see how much of that other paddock is going to be sprayed. And actually, while we're here, let's quickly do an experiment. Let's go to Orthomosaic. Let's find how small a weed some of these weeds are. There you go, what's he? That's a small weed, smallish weed. Line. measure, 180. I was doing this earlier, and I was sort of being able to measure weeds that are about bang on that 100 millish in size that I was visually myself able to identify. Yeah, something like that. There you go, 90 mil weed. So that's an example. So pretty much at that height, or that pixel size of 1.7 for the Mavic at 65 meters, you should be picking up sort of 100 mil weeds and bigger. You're unlikely to get anything smaller than that. They're just too small to be picked up by the AI. I mean, they may be down to sort of 60, 70 mil, but yeah, it's not going to get them all. So that's just the trade-off. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty good when you're saving 90% of your chemical. You can probably live with a couple of the smaller weeds getting through. I'll show you the next bit. Alright, this is as I mentioned, this is the wheat stubble paddock, the second bit of crop that we flew, and as I mentioned, it's much fuller in weeds. They were pretty much everywhere. So it's only spraying 40% of the paddock. That's with a 1 meter buffer around every weed, as opposed to I think I did 3 on the last one. But given how many weeds there are in this paddock, I think even though you could actually spray 40% if you really wanted to, you're obviously going to miss the real small ones because it's not going to be detected by the drone. Yeah, just looking at that, if they were all sort of grouped together, so like there was really intense sort of in here and not too bad out here, you'd probably just you would spray it, you'd conglomerate all this together and then let it individually spray the rest of it. But because it's almost all over, even the thinner bits, you know, your sprayer's going to be going along and then just going to... As I said, I think this one's probably you're better off just blanket spraying this. So this is where the farmer has to go to either the contractor like myself or to himself and go, nah, just drive into the paddock, have a quick look. Nah, this one's full weeds. Let's just blanket spray this one. Go next door. Okay, this one's got isolated weeds here, and here. We'll target spray this one. So it's, you know, everything. There's a place for everything. Not every paddock's going to be worthwhile mapping like this, but yeah, certainly some will. And remembering, you know, every year, if you do it well, every year you should be getting less and less. Alright, so that's just that second paddock, like I said I'd show you. That'll be the end of the video for now. I will put another one out following this one, which will be essentially the same, but it'll be picking thistle out of a bush block, and then following it all the way through to the actual DJI Agris TB50 spraying the weeds. So you'll actually get to see that in operation and get a feel for that. But yeah, hopefully this has given a bit of education to a few people and gets you thinking of things you might be able to use on your own farm. Cheers guys.